Welcome to Sacred Cow Shipyards, where no ship is safe from being called a piece of ship.
Oh, hey, would you look at that? We have music now. Or we might have music, assuming I did everything correctly, which with me is a massive assumption. So imagine, if you will, that there is or was or could be music associated with these words, and, well, hopefully I got it all right and put it all together in the correct way. Because holy hell, the software you squishies use to put together these things, to create your files, to output them onto your cloud or stream or whatever the f it is you're doing, is goddamn obnoxious. Anywho, if there is actually music associated with this content that you're hearing right now, I will drop a link in the description for the video for the person who made it, and maybe you can hit them up if you want music for your own stuff as well, because, you know, spread the love and all that. Now, the funny part of this story is that I was planning on having an episode about how music was important for some TV series some time ago, blah, 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 so on and so forth. And then stuff happened on your planet. And it's topical stuff. So I figured we might as well have a topical episode for once in this channel's miserable fucking life. Deal with it. Although on the flip side, don't count on this being a regular thing, since last episode was also a kind of like real world episode for you walnuts, so we're kind of doubling up on this, but again, just deal with it and move on with your miserable short little lives. And the topical news, of course, is the Felicity Ace's fire. Wait, who the fuck named a goddamn ship the Felicity Ace? What the fuck name is that? Holy fuck, was someone just fucking about one day when they were naming ships or some goddamn shit? Felicity Ace? Really? Alright, fine, whatever. Anyways, the Felicity Ace is a car carrier, otherwise known as a ro-ro, otherwise known as a roll-on, roll-off, because that's what they do when they tie up to port. They lower a ramp on their stern and they lower another ramp on their bow, and on one or the other of those ramps they roll off the cars, and on the ramp, they roll on the cars simultaneously. So ideally, they spend almost no time in port, because time in port is expensive on your little tiny blue globe. And yes, for those of y'all who know fuck all about freighting things around your tiny fucking blue globe, ports charge for docking rates by, well, normally maybe not the hour, but basically by the hour. Every hour you tied up, you accrue a charge. So the fewer hours you can be tied up, the better. Now there's also the entry and exit charge of the tugs associated with getting into and out of port. But still, that's kind of like a fixed cost of like, okay, I have to get to this port, so we're going to play at tugs anyways, right? But let's spend as little time as possible in this port because they are charging us for all the time we're spending in the port. Makes sense, right? That's why you made the ro-ros, where you can like unload and load simultaneously on the same ship, and it's, well, I mean, kind of awesome, to be perfectly frank. But I'm not a perfect Frank, am I? Anyways, moving on. So somewhere about 70 to 90 miles from a chain of islands called the Azores, the Felicity Ace decided to catch on fire. And that's where our story gets complicated. Really, really, really complicated. So, first off, for all you normies out there, intercontinental oceanic shipping on your tiny, insignificant planet is really, really complicated just by itself. You literally have no idea how complicated it is because it's just insulated from you. Yes, there are ships going back and forth. It's great. And there's a company that technically owns that ship. Its name might or might not be on the side of that ship. And that's where this all gets so very, well, like I said, complicated. And then on top of that, depending on what kind of cargo carrier we're talking about, although this is not particularly relevant to the Felicity Ace, the containers on the freighter carrying the containers might or might not be owned by the freighting company, who might or might not own the ship that the containers are on. We're reaching like Inception levels of complicated, aren't we? Well, let's dial it back just a minute. Because simplistically, the Felicity Ace's cars were not containerized. They were driven onto the ro-ro, and they were parked on the ro-ro. And they're just like free-range cars on the ro-ro. So at this point, it becomes a question of ownership, which naturally is fucking complicated. Depending on the terms of the shipping contract, either the shipping company owns all the vehicles until they get delivered to the destination, or People's Car Company owns all the vehicles in perpetuity, and this is not really a significant point, or we get into the weirdness concept of general average. Now, general average is just plain weird because fundamentally, if a ship came under heavy seas and had to discharge, enough cargo to stay afloat, then all the people whose cargo showed up at the port that the ship was headed towards made some, general average contribution to the people whose cargo got lost. Because when things go sideways, you don't have time to sit down and go, hey, are we tossing over diamonds or are we tossing over feathers? No one knows. No one cares. Shit's going sideways. Toss it the fuck over already. The fundamental upshot is that the People's Wagon Company lost their entire load of vehicles. Fine. And technically, the shipping company might have lost an entire load of vehicles too. And also, technically, the master of the ship might have also lost an entire load of vehicles on top of those other two, loads of vehicles lost. And this is where your Hume concept of insurance gets really fucking weird. Because, of course, the People's Car Company lost their shipment because it didn't make it to the port. And, of course, the shipping company lost their shipment because, it burned to the fucking waterline. And of course, the master lost the shipment because, fundamentally, the master of the ship, as your militaries explain, that he is basically in charge of the ship and he is actually the sole cutout of, if the ship goes wrong, it is literally your fault. So somehow, on a ship that carried X number of vehicles, somehow, 3X at least vehicles got lost. So, okay, that's the financial problems with what's going on right now. Now we entered into the concept of legitimate salvage. Fuck. Legitimate salvage is a fucked up concept that is fundamentally fucked up and just plain shitty when you get right down to it, and is so very complicated because it hasn't been ever standardized on your shit-stained planet. So congratulations, you're making this harder than it needs to be. The basic problem, and I'm boiling this down so very far for your smooth-brained minuscule minds, is that if a ship were to come across another ship in international waters, that is to say outside of 12 nautical miles from any country's shores, then if the other ship were abandoned, that is to say completely devoid of crew, then the ship that came across it could claim it as legitimate salvage. Now, naturally, the ship coming across the other ship is disallowed from decrewing the other ship for the purposes of salvage. But this is why the crew of the Felicity Ace abandoning it wholeheartedly is such a big deal. Now, is anyone going to claim the Felicity Ace as salvage? Who the fuck knows? And if they do, it will be an absolutely fascinating Admiralty court case, because the last time I remember this kind of thing happening was when we were talking about one of your tiny ass little cruise ship things that was absolutely infested with rats and absolutely no one wanted it, and it was just floating around. And that's the other side of this problem. You see, the crew of the Felicity Ace didn't just abandon it because they knew they'd be on the financial hook for its contents. They abandoned it because it was on fire, and not just any kind of on fire. It was uncontrollably on fire. Now, I don't know how or why or when or where that fire got so bad, but I can give you some insight as to how your surface ships deal with these kind of fires on a day-to-day basis, and you can draw your own conclusions, because I don't actually fucking care. So the thing is, for most of your surface nautical ships of these days in your timeline, most of the engineering spaces and spaces where fires are prone to happen have automated fire suppression systems built into them, as you would expect. Most of these systems are built around something called halon, which is otherwise known, of course, as bromotrifluoromethane. Yeah, that's a mouthful. And what does halon do? Well, that's an interesting question, because you think of fire as a triangle where there is oxygen, which of course oxidizes a fuel, and there is fuel, which of course burns, and there is heat, which of course causes the burning. That's all great and well. But what halon does is affect the other side, because fire is actually a tetrahedron, and it involves a fourth aspect called a chain reaction, and halon knocks that part out. And without that, the fire cannot continue. If you would like to know more about that particular detail, I would suggest looking up something called purple K, otherwise known as potassium bicarbonate, but that's an entirely different conversation. Anyways, back to halon. Halon is what most people call a space suppressor, meaning it's kind of like a sprinkler. If a fire breaks out, it just sprays from the ceiling and hopefully puts the fire out and hopefully doesn't kill the people inside. There's some details about how effective halon is at killing you squishies, but it's really, really good at putting out fires. So, I don't actually know how the fires in the Felicity Ace got that bad, but if they escaped the halon suppression system, then they got really bad really fast. Because the problem is, the Felicity Ace only had 22 people on board it, and every last one of them got off unscathed, which I guess technically is a good thing. But 22 people for a 200-meter long vessel is not that many people. And it's definitely not that many people when a fire breaks out, because it takes at least 4 people to run a fire hose. Because you got the guy at the front of the fire hose. He's like handling the, nozzle of the fire hose to keep it from going wherever the hell it wants to go. And then you got the guy back on the valve opening and closing the fire hose appropriately. And then you've got at least 2 people managing where the fire hose goes, because fire hoses are really, really pressurized and typically want to go wherever the they want to go, which is a problem for you little weak-ass squishies. And right about now you're going, oh no, 4 people out of 22. That's not that many people. Well, fuck you, you goddamn imbecile. The problem is, for a compartment scale fire, like a room-size fire, you need at least 2 fire crews. You need a fire crew to suppress the fire, and you need a fire crew to fight the fire. And that's, well, 2 hoses, which means at least 8 people out of a crew of 22. And, well, given that this is a civilian vessel, not a military vessel, so they're not running damage control drills every other day to learn how to fight a fire, and they probably didn't get on scene fast enough, and they probably didn't get set up fast enough, and they probably had no goddamn clue what the fuck they were doing, because, again, civilian vessel doesn't drill. Yeah, this fire spread before they got there. They were out of their depth before they even knew what was going on. It's not technically their fault. It's not really anyone's fault. I mean, again, 22 people on a vessel that is 200 meters long and 32 meters wide, yeah, they can't have eyes on all the spaces all the time. So a fire started somewhere, not sure why, it spread, it got uncontrollable, and people had to abandon ship. I can't fault them for that. But now, on top of the financial aspect, there's a whole new problem. Because, right, the crew abandoned the ship, and that's the end of the problem, right? Right? Nope, totally not. Because, you see, your surface-going ships these days catch on fire with a frightening frequency, but the problem is your modern ships might catch on fire as bad as this one, but when they catch on fire, they don't normally sink. For a variety of reasons, and we won't get into that right now. But the real problem is that you now have a 200-meter long, 32-meter wide, 60,000 fucking ton brick floating out there with no controls, no propulsion, no anything. And it's kind of funny. You Humies used to have all of your ships go along certain paths because of the winds. That's how you got ships from one continent to the other, as you followed the winds. So all of your ships followed fundamentally the same paths. But now your ships can propel themselves across the ocean, across the world, and yet they still end up on the same paths. Because when you go from point A to point B, there's an optimal way to go from point A to point B. And when lots and lots of people go from point A to point B, well, there's an optimal way to go from point A to point B. And now, there is a decidedly suboptimal brick in the path from point A to point B. This ain't good. Because, you see, like I said, ships like the Felicity Ace only have 22 crew on board. They might have someone on the bridge. In fact, your United States Navy basically treats ships like this as not having a personnel, crew member, whatever, on the bridge. In fact, when your United States Navy comes across a ship like this, even if your U.S. Navy ship has the right of way, they get out of the way of the freighter / tanker / robo / whatever, because it's just plain easier. So yeah, these ships actually have the technology on board to have the radar to go out and find obstructions, and then they have the automated navigation system that can couple into the radar system and say, oh, there's an obstruction out there, we should avoid it. They don't do that, because any deviation from the optimal path from point A to point B costs fuel and time, and both of those cost money. And no shipping company wants to waste money. So yeah, freighters just kind of go. Tankers just kind of go. Any kind of civilian commercial craft just kind of goes. And if there's a random free-range floating fucking brick just kind of dangling out there in the middle of goddamn nowhere that the freighter can see coming and can't do anything about, well, guess the fuck what? This just got a whole goddamn lot more complicated. Now, are there deep water tugs that can go out there and recover that Ro-Ro? Absolutely they are. It'll take him about a week to get to his last known reported location. And maybe by that time the fires will have gone out. And if they haven't, those tugs will either have to put out the fires themselves or wait them out, because they are sure as hell not going to tie up to a ship on fire. And then once they tie up, they still have to get this flaming fucking hulk back to shore and not being a navigational hazard anymore. And this, ladies and gentlemen, is why you don't hear about ships being abandoned on the high seas very much. There's a financial complement. In fact, there's like a recursive, massive financial complement involved. There is a navigational hazard problem involved. And then there's the question of whether or not she's actually legitimate salvage. I mean, technically, I believe she is, but I am not an Admiralty court, so good luck with that. It's complicated. This is why crews don't abandon ships in the middle of the ocean, unless they absolutely have to. And yeah, if you are looking to score yourself some cheap people's cars, yeah, they're burned, they're toast, they're done. Sorry. And that's all from Sacred Cow Shipyards. Please be advised that any ship left on the dock for more than 24 hours will be compressed to a cube at the owner's expense. Have a nice day.